The choice is always yours. Whatever society may claim, it can't control you.
So what's your podcast about?
Oh, it's about psychology, true crime, supernatural stuff, occasional paranormal or philosophical rant.
Well, maybe I could check it out sometime.
If you go to Temple Square, you'll see Masonic handshakes, you'll see the all-seeing eye, you'll see the sun, the moon, the stars. There's no crosses on the Mormon temple. There's nothing Christian on the outside of the Mormon temple.
The ones who will not only survive, but will thrive, are the ones who realize that there's nothing to be afraid of.
Health in the navel, marrow in the bones, strength in the loins and in the sinews, power in the priesthood be upon me and my posterity for all generations of time and all eternity.
But I warn you, if you make any further inquiries, or if you say a single word to anyone, there will be the most dire consequences for you.
There's nothing to be afraid of.
It can't control you.
Do I have an original thought in my head?
This is your nautical lantern on the dangerous seas of darkness. Let's push off from the placid shore of the status quo and explore what's beyond the horizon. I am your host, BT, and this is Truth and Shadow, your podcast of the supernatural.
There's a pattern you start to notice when you look closely at belief systems. Not from the outside, but from the inside. Every faith tradition begins with a story, a sense of purpose, a framework for making sense of the world. That part is universal and deeply human. We all want meaning. We all want belonging. We all want a story that tells us where we came from and why we're here. But sometimes stories become cages. And this episode looks at what happens when a belief system stops functioning as a guide and starts functioning as a mechanism of control. And while what we're discussing is specific in its details, rooted in the history, the teachings, the culture of the Mormon faith, the underlying dynamics apply far more broadly. You're going to hear echoes of this in almost any high-demand cult or closed ideological community. It starts with a certain level of certainty. And that certainty feels good. It feels safe. It feels like it gives us structure to the chaotic world in which we live. But certainty also has a cost. It can make questioning feel like we're betraying our leaders, who we trust. It can turn those same leaders into gatekeepers of truth, and then ordinary people will start to enforce those boundaries, most of the time without even realizing it. Many who grow up in environments like this don't initially see anything restrictive about it. The community is tight-knit, and that means the purpose of the community feels clear. The ceremony and rituals, they have a comforting effect, and the entire system reinforces itself by creating a shared identity so strong that leaving it feels not just untenable, but unthinkable. When your entire world, your family, your friends, social life, your work, your moral framework, eternal future, is tied to a single institution, walking away means, well, losing far more than just belief. And that's one of the themes we explore in this episode, that emotional, rational, and psychological costs of stepping outside a faith that has defined your reality for so long. There's also history to consider, the origins of the belief system, the choices of its founder, the cultural influences at play. When you peel back the layers of early Mormonism, you find not only a theology, but an idea built on folk magic, using ritualized practices, messianic ideas, all around a charismatic leader who blended revelation with some kind of experimentation. Understanding that history isn't about disrespect, it's about clarity. It's about recognizing how certain ideas took root and how they continue to shape the lives and experiences of millions. But the most important part of this episode isn't the historical record. It's the human story. What happens when someone starts to realize the structure around them isn't what they thought? What happens when questions that used to be dismissed as unimportant start to feel unavoidable? What happens when the cost of staying silent costs more than it does to speak up? Exiting a high-control religious environment isn't as simple as losing your faith. It's a process of rebuilding your sense of identity from the ground up. It's grieving things like relationships that are going to fracture under the pressure of shunning. And sometimes that shunning is explicit and other times subtle, but it's always painful. There's a hardship in trying to stand on your own 2 feet after a lifetime of being told that your safety, your morality, and your salvation depend on staying inside this system. And leaving it can also reveal something powerful. That autonomy is not a threat. Questioning is not a moral failure. That community can be chosen instead of assigned because of whatever system of belief we're involved in. And that belief, when held freely rather than enforced, becomes something living, welling up to life inside of us, instead of something imposed and dark. What you hear in this episode is not an attack on people of faith. We're not dismantling their spirituality. We're going to take a closer look at how institutions, honestly any institution, can drift into controlling patterns when loyalty becomes more important than truth, and when protecting the structure becomes more important than protecting the individual. It's a reminder that systems are not infallible, that leaders are human, that every belief system, no matter how polished, has a shadow side, and that sometimes the only way to find genuine faith is to step outside of the version that was handed to you and discover what remains when the pressure, the expectations, and the fear are gone. This episode is about courage. The courage to ask hard questions, to face uncomfortable truths, and to reclaim the ownership of your own inner life. They say the devil hides in the details, but I've seen enough to know he hides in the design. Every age builds a machine to control belief. It wears the mask of progress, of doctrine, of truth. The people involved swear they serve the light. But light without love becomes a weapon. And the sinister forces, they know this. They don't need to destroy faith, they only need to counterfeit it. They need an echo chamber to keep the illusion alive. What I've been examining isn't a conspiracy of men, it's the architect of corruption itself. Joining us in this episode is a voice that's walked the long corridor between belief and awakening. She spent years tracing the circuitry of deception, peeling back the layers of systems that call themselves sacred. Her work has become a roadmap for those who've begun to hear the grinding gears turning in their own walls of faith. She is the watcher of the veil, the cartographer of the unseen, the unbound saint. Heidi, welcome to Truth and Shadow.
Thank you for that introduction. That was awesome. I appreciate you asking me on. And in your introduction, you said something that I just barely watched a little thing on this, and I think it's so relevant, is they did a study just recently on people in elevators. And they would simply get in the elevator and get in. Everybody would be facing the correct way. And everyone else that wasn't in on it that they wouldn't understand what's happening, but everybody would turn the wrong way, like away from the door, like stare at a wall. Okay. And then so the person that's kind of being pranked, at first they're just like, what is happening? And then eventually they turn and do the same thing, even though they know, even though you can see on their face. There was one in particular, they did it like 5 times, that this is confusing to them. And even the one resisted for quite some time and eventually conceded. And I think that this explains exactly what you just said, right? It's like, okay, it's the masses. This is the exact thing that you're saying. And it's sad because we have all been taught that free think is dangerous. We are dangerous people.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yes. So, yeah.
Right. So drop your links. Tell me, because you have your own podcast, just advertise that for a second here and kind of your goals with that program for my audience.
Amazing. Yes, I am Heidi Love of the Unfiltered Rise Podcast. I'm everywhere podcasts are served. I do have my own website, unfilteredrisepodcast.com. And the best place to find me is on Spotify. The old YouTube doesn't love my algorithm, so it gets once a week. Spotify gets 2 to 3, and busy stuff. If I've got extra things, I put it there because sometimes I just can't put things on there that I'm talking about. So my goal for my program was, I got out of Mormonism and God was like, hey, that thing where you said you'd do anything? Guess what you're going to do? Oh. And then I said, no, not that. I don't think you're correct. Like, look again, God. And yeah, you don't really do that with God. He knew way more than I knew. I just thought that no one would listen to me because I have no real friends and I live in Utah.
Right. Yeah, I mean, the difficult thing is that I've run across is, I know more women who are Church of Latter-day Saints of Jesus Christ, and not so many guys. They don't seem to be outspoken about it, which is really odd because it reminds me a lot like Freemasonry. The men don't really talk about it unless you ask questions. And so, for example, or to question you, it's basically you've seen that faith from the inside for 32 years, I think it was. And so I'm curious, what was it that made you realize something behind that was basically part of that machine of deception?
The cabal of cuckoo is what I like to call it. And it's not to be mean at all. I'm just saying, most religions have some sort of cabal inside of them in some form or fashion. They've had scandals, there's problems. But with this particular situation with Mormonism, we have a lot of things at play, right? We have a master mason that created it. So you're not wrong. But, I just did a show exposing some very odd things that I found on accident, which is per usual with me. I'll find these weird things because I feel like it's God-led and it's witchcraft. And I just did a full show on it. People can go check that out. But I think for me, I never would have got out if somebody had come at me with like my last show, for example, the witchcraft show. I would have shut down, freaked out, and gone and read my scriptures and never watched that person again ever in my life, right? Like anti-Mormon propaganda. You are a bad person. It's you, not the information. You're a bad person. And so even when you're arguing with people back and forth and saying, not argue, but this is like a historical fact from the Salem Society. Like, here it is. They still say, she is making this up. And I'm like, great. So I understand this whole like obfuscation propaganda worked with me as well, because for years I did not see anything except for a benevolent church. And that was my whole life. I was born in it. My family's, clear back Mormons. They were across the plains, the whole deal. So I never saw anything until I almost died. And when you almost die, things change rapidly because you have no time left, right? At least you think you don't. And I was blessed and I did, but I had thyroid cancer. It was very advanced. It had been latent. I didn't know. It's a very treatable cancer, but not when you're like almost a stage 4. So I was like rapidly going through like, what if I meet my maker? What if these things are coming for you? And, as I dissected, I really wanted to know for the first time in my life, why doesn't this make sense? Because even if I found a crack before that, no big deal. Put a patch on it. Who cares, right? Who cares? It doesn't matter. And if the prophet was a racist and a raving lunatic, who cares? Because he's just a man, right? He's only a man until he's not, until he's the prophet and speaking to God. So it's all just a bunch of cracked walls with like very simple patching, right? And eventually when things got real, and it got extremely real for me at that point, I started seeing little things. And at that time, my husband came into my life as well. I was so blessed that it was perfect. He had already been out since he was 16. He was showing me Christian things, not necessarily anti-Mormon things, but just Christianity, like without ties. Like, why don't you just read this Bible? Why don't you just do these things, And my mom had gotten out years and years before, and she was even a Stevens minister, which is like a lay minister for the sick in a non-denominational Christian church. And she had always planted tiny seeds, but never been scary or abrupt. She had never hit me with like the Bible and said, you're a cult. That's gonna. People are shutting off at that moment. I promise you. And those seeds came to fruition more than a decade later. So I always tell people, never give up on your family. Just don't, or whoever it is you're working on, because it did matter. It did eventually matter. And my shelf broke, as they say, right? Yeah.
Something that's kind of curious to me is when we look at some of these systems of control, I guess that's a good way of calling it. Typical behaviors would be shunning, an imposed silence. Sometimes there's a long road of reconciliation. What did that look like within your own personal experience if you look back at it? Because like you said, if someone just come at you with the sword and said, hey, this is a cult and I'm going to slice it all up, well, you'll shut down. But after a period of time, after your realization hit and you start looking back at it, what were these things that you kind of look back and say, hey, that was something that felt wrong?
There was a lot that felt wrong. And I knew coming out, you want to talk about shunning. I think that kept me in for an extra 5 years. And to be quite honest, if I had not met my husband when I did, I probably would have stayed that way because I didn't want to lose what I knew was coming for me. I had watched it with my mom. Like I said, she had come out of Mormonism. I watched it with my uncle, who was way more abrupt and just came up to me at like 11 and a half and said, that they swear they're going to cut their throats in there and blah, blah, because this was in the 80s. Scared the death out of me because like my grandma was my hero. And you're telling me my grandma's doing, this kind of stuff. And of course, back then, they just lied. If you catch an old time Mormon and you hit them with some real truth from the temple, sacred stuff, sacred to them, or secret, as I like to say, they will just lie about it and say that was never a thing. But whereas the new Mormons say, well, that used to be a thing, but we've done away with that. And so they're a little more truthful, right? And as truth goes. And I knew I was going to lose my family. I was the only one of my grandma's kids, because she did help raise me, that made it to the temple. And it was everything to her. It was everything. And I knew that. And it was a big part of the reason why I went again after being traumatized in the temple the first time. Not that they were, okay, look, and we were talking about this pre-roll. They are not doing orgies in there that I saw. Look, does it happen underground, LDS Church of Satan? I don't know. I'm not in that. I don't know. I was a mainstream normie, TBM, True Blue Mormon, and I just only had what I knew, which was my family and regular Mormons, which is why we don't clump them all together, because the congregation is not your problem. You know, they love God. Most of them, they don't know. They don't know. And so that's the whole reason why I speak out, is to hopefully help them if they happen to find me, because I'm also not trying to come at them with a sword, right? I don't give my podcast out. The first thing I ask people in Utah, if they ask me about what I do, is, are you LDS? Because I don't share that with people that aren't ready. That's just not appropriate for people. You know, you've got to remember, we're dealing with people and feelings. And yeah, this was my whole life. This was not a religion for me. This was my life, you know? And so losing that, you know, my grandma did a very, I would say, unusual thing. Yes, shunning is something that happens. My grandma tried to take my kids away. She made false accusations to CPS. She did a lot of things that I would not think anybody else would do. She's like the 0.5% of people that would ever come at another exmo like that. Like, I don't think that's normal. Most people love their kids and they want to be with them still, or bring them back in somehow nicely. Like, I don't think that's normal. But I knew that was going to happen because I knew who she was, you know? So yeah, it was hard. I lost all of my extended family to this day. I've been out a long time, and I'm headed up to 50 this next year. So I've been out since I was 34, and yeah, I was not as outspoken as I am now because I didn't even understand it until later. So yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes when I look at groups that may have kind of an interesting beginning, that's generally where I go back to, as I look at who the founding figures are of a specific group. Because you're right, there's some really good people out there that go to church on Sunday. They don't shop on Sunday. They don't do any kind of anything that violates their views of within the LDS community, and they just live their lives as pretty good people, you know. But at the same time, when you start looking back at the beginning of all of it, right? We go back to Joseph Smith, Brigham Young, and everybody. I kind of look around and say, well, there's something that seems like the sinister forces, and I've defined that basically as the fallen angels, the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim, and then the humans that collaborate with them. So kind of a corrupted trinity of entities, if you will. And so when you look at some of the background and some of the history and some of the dark times that the Mormon Church began, do you sense that there's something similar behind all of that to start, and how to influence Joseph Smith to begin?
Yes. So I just took an allergy pill and I hope it gets better. Sorry about my asthma and allergies today. Hopefully I don't keep pausing, but if I do, it's because I had to cough. So yes, with Joseph Smith, he, like you, I started doing this after my I guess deconstruction, right? Like, I don't even think I started studying family lines until maybe a year ago. And I've been doing podcasting 2.5 years now. I didn't care. You know, I was kind of like, oh, well, you know, this or that, whatever the case may be about like symbolism. Like, it was more on a surface level. But then like you, I started thinking like, oh, if this is this way for me with my family, how is this with him for his family, right? You kind of want to understand. Yeah. And so 100% correct. And people don't really know this, but you know, he was Irish. He was a Celt. Like, this makes a lot more sense when you look at this in a Gaelic broader overview. And then there's actually, on the mom's side, Lucy Mack, right? It's an interesting name. Solomon Mack is who her dad is. Well, there's a lot of speculation about her heritage, being Ashkenazi. And I can't prove that yet. So I will say this. Her father wrote a book and he speaks all about being Jewish. And so I've only heard this. I have not studied it for myself. However, it makes a lot more sense if we have this type of history, right? He's being raised up and we know that he went through his brother to live at the Dartmouth College, they were there in a house that was provided for them. So he has access to things that most people wouldn't have. His distant cousin, John Smith, Johnny is who they say he is, Professor Johnny Smith of Dartmouth. His stuff is very interesting. And the Church of Christ, which was originally the name for the LDS Church, comes up through this guy, through all of his teachings at Dartmouth. People can go read them. I've been reading them. And so when you look at this, it's not a big surprise that he was taught how to possibly, and I say 100% he did, conjure things, okay? He carried the Jupiter talisman in his pocket. It was, identified by his wife. It is unarguable that it was one of his most prized possessions, period. She said so. So she wanted it back. We can blame the parchments on Hiram and this and that, but we know this. They have magical items. This is a cultic, if we want to call it that. Things. And I do believe what he spoke to, Moroni, was a channeled angel, fallen angel. I mean, that's what I believe. And if you go off of Mormons, he was practicing necromancy because Moroni, per Joseph Smith's words, was a dead Native American that turned white for some weird reason. Not white like an angel, just like the skin color. And that's what he said it was, a dead guy that was alive now, like talking to him. Well, that's necromancy. I hate to break it to people,
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting when you dig into some groups out there. Joseph Smith, this is what, the 1800s? I mean, there's all sorts of really interesting things popping off in Great Britain, here in the United States, seances. There's all sorts of really interesting witchcrafty things going on. And when you learn, because I learned that, Joseph Smith, yes, he had learned how to do conjurations and things because I think it was family, which, would make sense. A lot of that is handed down generation, whatever. And you start reading about other occultists like John Dee and Edward Kelly and some of the things that they were doing with that Enochian system of magic. And you start to connect these really weird lines that makes you look like you've got a board of just conspiracy lines everywhere connecting everything. But what it is it's like there's this system that wants people to have faith in it. And then there's programming going on so that they maintain their status quo, right? We spoke about, hey, if I come at you as I'm a Catholic and I come at a Mormon and I do it the way of saying, look, in the Book of Mormon, it says this, this, and this, and it contradicts what it says here. It's like Book of Mormon says Jesus was born in Jerusalem and it's clearly not in Jerusalem. And it's, there's all these things, but if you do that, they shut you off, right? And that's the programming. And so I'm curious when I'm talking to you, Heidi, that where is that invisible line where devotion turns into this brainwashing, lack of a better word?
Right. Right. Yeah. And you mentioned the interesting times and the people he studied with. And one of them that you never ever hear about was Joseph Smith's Hebrew teacher, Joshua Seixas, Seixas. And, he couldn't write a letter in English or possibly write the Book of Mormon, but he is studying Hebrew. That's cool. Cool story. Yeah. And the Templars are a big thing then. We've got different rites of Masonry, which Scottish Rite is the one that gets blamed often for all of this stuff with, the Mormons. But guess what? It was pretty new at the time of Joseph Smith and his whole situation there. So no, I don't think so. As we study all of these things that are available to him, the people that surround him, it all matters. And you're right. They whitewashed it just like they whitewash everything. Like you mentioned, you're Catholic. So, we have the white Pope and we have the black Pope. Why do we have two of them, right? Because one person does the things that needs to happen and the other person stays benevolent. Obviously. Yeah. So when we look at this system of control, it happens in every religion because it has to, right? Order doesn't come from chaos. It may start from chaos and people will organize it, but that's not real life. Like, do you ever meet anyone whose life is perfectly orderly? Because everything's chaos in my life. I don't know, that's the real world. The real world is chaos. It is a completely unorganized situation. And so if you're going to make it make sense, even the Catholic Church does this where they'll add in certain things for the timeline. They'll erase certain things for the timeline. So somebody, AKA Brigham Young, came in and said, look, this is a hot mess. Joseph left us in a crazy mess and I want to make money. And in order to do that, we got to fix it up. They had a reformation and they did under Brigham Young. Joseph Smith had passed and Sidney Rigdon did not win that little challenge for the beginnings to go on. But where did he go? Well, we talked about these splinter groups, and I think that's where this weird LDS Church of Satan stuff comes. And I don't discount any of that. I'm just saying, there's different branches of religion everywhere. Like if you go ask a Catholic, it doesn't mean they're all the same kind of Catholic. They're not, So, yeah.
It's kind of an interesting idea, systems of control that are designed to create more devotion. And at the same time, when we look at things like media or education or popular culture, are you seeing that same kind of spiritual architecture behind them that operates within that same kind of religious background that we can follow with the early creators of a specific movement, like we're talking about with the LDS?
%. So we lost a lot of things during the Dark Ages, and it wasn't just we quit inventing things or we became stagnant, right? Why did that happen? We always have to ask the why, but people don't like you to ask the why. So when this happened, one thing you mentioned, education. One thing they took away is how many people spoke Latin after that? Not very many. They weren't supposed to read the Bible themselves, right? It was not in their wheelhouse. Somebody needed to interpret that for them. And with the LDS Church, that's why we have stuff like the Joseph Smith translation of the Bible. That's why we have the living prophet. But what happens when the living prophet says something that's not true? Well, people that don't know that aren't Mormon, we have something called the Journal of Discourses, and there is so many volumes. There's books on books on books of this Journal of Discourses where they say, we take it back. He wasn't right? And why do they do that? It's to organize the chaos. Because if you come in and say, okay, Brigham Young once was stated, this is a quote from him saying, somebody said, when will you remove the curse from the black man so that he may carry the priesthood? And he said, I can't. And they said, why not? And he said, because I didn't put it there. And they said, well, so when will it be removed? And he said, when God comes and removes it. Wow, snarky, right? Yeah, but how do you explain that in the timeline if you don't fix it, right? So you have to say, well, maybe he was having a bad day that day and he wasn't the prophet in that moment, so you got to chuck it out. But he's still a great guy. Oh, okay. So they do this. They do this in not just in religion and history and politics, like everything. You mentioned education. Again, I'll mention this. They do it. That's why we have education. That's the answer. Like if you have a kid that does horrible at school, it's probably because you might have done a good job at home. Right? You're just telling them like, don't believe everything you hear, and then they get in trouble. But yeah, it's all it is. So it's unfortunate.
One of the things is like, I'm a convert to Catholicism, and you're clearly a convert away from LDS into Christianity as well. So we go through these different kind of stages where we start realizing certain things. And so when we leave a system as cultivated, I guess would be a good word for the LDS, of participation, control, programming, that works. When you leave that kind of system, many people talk about experiencing kind of a withdrawal system, right? Like they miss this, they miss that, they really wish they had that. And what was the hardest part for you to detox from that kind of faith?
I love the word you used, cultivate, because where do we get the word cult from, right? Like that's a fun one. And it's true. Like I understand if you are leading a people, because I'm a leader at my job, you have to have very specific rules, and we can't all just be willy-nilly. Like I work at I work at a hospital for mental people that have problems like detoxing or whatever. And if one person changes the rule that we set down, and that's because this person felt sympathetic for ABCD, it messes up the world. Okay. It can actually cause almost a riot. Okay. At where I am over a cigarette, nonetheless, probably. Yeah. It's just the little things, tiny things that may not seem to matter. Like if I told you that story, you might be like, so it's just a cigarette. Like, who cares? Right. Everybody does. Because if it's conceived as he's special and I'm not, or they got the rule broke and I didn't, whatever the case may be, if it's unjust, people are going to revolt. So I get that they have to contain it somehow, but I also understand that may not be truth. And it depends on what we want, right? Do you want the truth? Because that whole thing, the truth will set you free, but first it'll tick you off, right? I mean, and it's so true. Like I wanted the truth. And then when I got the truth, it ruined my life, kind of. Like it didn't, but at the time it did. Because it didn't just happen in rainbows and butterflies and then everything was great. No, my life got really hard after that. My life sucked after that. I didn't understand a lot of things. Like I blamed God. I did all these things, right? Like whenever, and I love, my mom says this all the time, whenever you sign up for God's army, the devil gets a notice. So whenever you do things that you may, feel really led to do, like baptism, for example, people will say, I got baptized, then my life fell apart. Right. Yeah. I mean, depends on to what, but yeah, I mean, if you're really trying to quest for God, it's probably going to be a hard road. And in that, then you say, yeah, well, okay, I'll give you an example from what you believe. Look at the saints. Like, were any of them really treated that great back in the day? Like, oh, not so good. Yeah. A lot of them martyred. Yeah. So we look at this stuff, or even look at the apostles. They all died like pretty horrifically, honestly. And I'm not an apostle or saint. I'm just giving those as examples because it's not a new condition. I'm not special. Like this is something that people that truly want the truth go through. We go through this. And you're right. I missed the camaraderie. I mostly missed my family. I was never 100% a fit in anyway, because I grew up with, parents that were Jack Mormons. So they didn't always accept me quite at the same level, but I didn't feel shunned or anything. I worked. I was a woman and worked. That's not typical of LDS people back then. We're talking the 90s. So, and not that they don't encourage education or anything, but they would prefer you, if you can, even if you have an education, to stay home, right? Raise your family if you have one. If you don't have one, great. But otherwise, they would like you to raise your kids, which is sound advice. That's great. But I didn't have that choice. And so was I missing Relief Society or the congregation or the temple? No. Did I miss the camaraderie? Yeah, I did. I liked getting together with people on their activities, or going with my grandma, to church. That was different because then you're with your family. It's just like you're in this community. The community part is huge even to this day. Like my daughter will come home even now from school. She's in 6th grade. I can't play with half of those kids because they're all Mormon. I'm not a Mormon, And she's like one of like maybe 10 kids in the whole school. I mean, it's saturated here. Even if they're Jack Mormons, they're still in the faith somehow. And that's hard, like to know I can't just go over to my neighbors and be like, hey, how's life? Like they don't really want to chat with me too much, And that's okay. I mean, I'm not mad at them for it. I understand I was there once. Like they're not unkind to me. They're just nothing to me. Right. So that's hard, also having to tiptoe on everything. Like I mentioned about my podcast, like I can't just go tell people what I do. I can't just go be myself everywhere, but that's part of living here. We can't really leave. People always say, oh my gosh, you're still in Utah. And I'm like, yeah, well, my mom's getting old and my grandkids are being born and everybody's here. And what do you do with that? You just up and leave that all? Like, no, I don't want to do that. So yeah, the community part is a hard situation. It rules everything in Utah. People can say that it doesn't. They can say, oh, but there's less Mormons now here in the state. Baloney. It runs the state. So it feels a little oppressed, still.
Yeah, there's some study that I've done on conversion theory and things like that, where a lot of people look back at where they came from, and it's usually some kind of either pretend verbal violence, hatred against where they came from, or there's other people that go, look, you know what, they taught me how to be a good person. And then you can carry that on, of course. And at the same time, there's also heavy forms of indoctrination going on, right? And I can't say that this isn't everywhere. I mean, it is in a lot of places. It's on our televisions, in our movies, it's in our video games. There's some kind of programming going on. But I feel and find that it's bigger in groups that are cultic in design. And I think that indoctrination will change your own inner voice. And so if you look at that idea of the inner voice, how do you think, how did it form your conscious mind to serve the system of Mormonism instead of God?
So I think I was a little bit lucky with these Jack Mormon parents, my hippie parents, hence my name is Heidi Love, right? That's like my real name. People always say, why did you pick that name? I'm like, I didn't, my dad, my hippie dad did. And of course, it's not my last name, but that is my middle name. And I just look at that and think he gave me some real nuggets of freedom in my brain when I was little, because he would say things like, well, I know, he was kind. He would say, I know your church says that, but also blah, blah, blah. Like he would never negate it, right? he would just add like, oh, well, science says blah, 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 or this, blah, blah, blah. And I also knew a lot of people growing up, like, okay, I lived in Idaho and there's a lot of Native Americans there. I knew them and I loved them and they were my friends. So I knew that racism was bad. Like it didn't, I mean, my stepdad was horrifically racist. My grandpa was pretty racist. I didn't become a racist because I had the ability to look around me and see my world for what it was. And even if I preached what they said, like, oh yeah, that's bad. Like deep down in my heart, I was like, that's not, I think you're crazy. You just put it in your mind already. So I was able to form some opinions of my own. I am very lucky that way because that is not normal. My parents were on a mission impossible. I think when I was little, they had a lot of problems and it led me to God early because when you are in turmoil and, my stepdad was horrifically abusive, not only to me, but especially to my mom. You learn things differently because you think like, oh, he preaches this, but look at how he acts, you see these certain things or, oh, this is a secret at home. We never talk about this, but they do this, this, and this. And so you learn a dichotomy where you're like, wait, obviously there's two different truths. Yeah. And so I was lucky. I was really lucky because I would cry out to God and say, like, help me. Like, I need help. Like, I'm a child. I am 9 years old. I need your help. And, he would help me. I definitely felt heard by God, regardless of my religion, and so I always had the inner monologue, I feel, of more of a person that was well balanced in a cult. I know that sounds weird, but I think I was lucky. And I think it's the only reason why I was able to hold on to Christianity coming out of Mormonism, because most people don't. They chuck it all out the window and they're atheists, which is sad, which is part of the reason why I like to speak, because I want them to know there's another way. Just because you were lied to about one thing doesn't mean everything is a lie. So that's hard if that's all you've ever been taught. That's really hard, not just for Mormons, for JWs, for tons of people coming out of these things. Like, if this is all the whole way and this is the only way and we're the only true church on the face of the earth, that is what they will tell you to this day. They're careful about the way they word it now. Like they're very, we're inclusive but exclusive. Yeah. And they all do it. The JWs have the 144,000 too. And all these people have their own little thing, but also they're like, but we love you. Yeah. I just think that, we're not the only ones, and I see it so often. And ultimately we have to peel it apart like an onion and say, what did God really say? What did he say? What did he say in the words that he said that have probably been whitewashed to the umpteenth and cut to pieces, I'm sure. Does that make it untrue? No. It just means maybe some pieces are unknown, right? Which is why we have faith, which people oftentimes throw out the window as well and discount. And I think it's so important. Like anybody could teach me anything. Headless was just on. We talked about Julian the Apostate. We had this whole conversation and it was great. And if somebody disagrees with me, that's fine. Like we had a full disagreement on our opinions, not history, just our opinions. And at the end of it, we both kind of went, maybe so. I mean, it was nice. It was nice, right? You can disagree and agree at the same time. That's more real. That's more realistic. And at that time, yeah, I just think at that time, I was very one-minded. And now I'm much more open-minded. People all the time will say on my podcast, this is a Christian podcast. What's this person doing on here? I'm like, because they have something to say. I mean, do we throw out the value of every single thing everybody's ever said just because they have some kind of wayward thing or some sin? Or I would love for them to understand about Paul. I mean, want to talk about sin? He's killing Christians, murder. And so we have to step back and say, no, these people have a nugget of truth also. And if we're all more philosophers in a way, I'm nothing's going to shake me. Like, you could bring me every single hidden book in the Vatican and all the proof in the world and, everything from underneath the temple that they hide to. Let's not just pick on Catholics. Like, everybody hides things. They all have pieces, keys, they might call them. But, it doesn't matter. If you truly believe in God, like, you're really not going to be shook.
Right. No, I commonly say that those people they're schemers. They're designed to kind of control their own little worlds, and that's all it is. But here, physically. But at the same time, what they're using to be schemers is they're using symbols or sigils or occult patterns. And so if we look at that idea itself, these occult patterns and the occult symbols, I mean, we do it today. We call it advertisement. It's the swoosh or the double arches. I mean, these things are all designed to do something to your limbic system in your brain. And so at the same time, religions have done it first, or maybe mystery schools originated this. But if you're looking at some of those rituals or ideas, because you've mentioned, some temple work or whatever, have you looked at those in a way that goes, hey, this might actually go back further? And then did you find anything?
Oh, 100%. There's a reason why people do the things they do. And I always talk about this with people when we get into the word magic, right? A lot of people get upset when we bring this up, but we're going to have to bring it up. Yes, I believe that magic is real, and it's been carried on, for many years. And why is that? Why would something that doesn't work, doesn't mean anything, it's all internal, it's all in your head, why would that continue on if it didn't work? Because it does. Why do people make bargains that cost them their very soul or that of their family or whatever if it didn't work? Like, clearly there are dark things at hand. And even if you type into Grok, which I did, like, what does the temple ceremony of the LDS people most resemble? And I thought it would come up Freemasonry. It didn't. It came up Babylonian. So it all goes back to that almost every time. Like, when we look at these splits between a god and multi-god, multi-gods, it's always that. There is always that. It's either now it's really popular with Gnostic movement, like, you're wrong because Jesus is there, but blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, but if I don't believe like you, then my God's a demon. Okay. And so when we look at this stuff and we go backward, it's been this from the beginning of time, which is why the very first commandment we have is what? Right? Have no other gods before me. And why is that so important, right? It's everything. And it is in everything. They know that it works. That's why it's in advertising. They know that paying homage to Saturn or whatever the heck they're picking that day, right, is going to work. And why? Bernays, right? And the advertising mogul that, is mostly accredited, not all the way, but with making this mainstream. They have figured this out so long ago. It doesn't mean they're right. It just means they have more knowledge, right? So knowledge is power. That's literally what we all hear from like a child. And how many people read, let alone we can't read everything that they read because they're in mystery schools from like, who knows, from birth, some of them. I postulate the really important, this is postulation. This is my thoughts on this. The mission of the LDS people is such a great cover, because if they have a child that wants to go into the CIA or the FBI or the blah, 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 or wants to have, they're important, their bloodline's important, they're going to be, one of the 70 or the 12 or the next prophet, they're not going to a regular mission. Get out of here with that. That's 2 years that they've got, right? Like at a perfect age, you're like 18. They actually moved it down from 19. And they moved it downward, I believe, because you're forming your reality, right? Like this is critical timing. And they've already, indoctrinated us from a child, like at the before 5, you're forming your personality and obedience. And that's why they do that. That's why the CIA and the FBI and everything recruit so heavily for Mormons. We're already half trained. We're already half MK Ultra'd in our brain, not the way with like nefarious, mean, horrible things that you see later in people and studies, but they use it. Why go watch conference people, listen to the men, listen how they sing song voice, listen how they speak. They're never loud. They're very meek. They're, not extroverted, like tons of hand movements or moving around, or, there's a reason for every single thing they do, including the way they dress. It's all conformity. You cannot be a priesthood holder and wear a black or brown or pink shirt to church. I mean, unless they've changed it, it always had to be white, right? And so there's a reason for this madness. And why do the Mormons look just like CIA agents on Sunday? Please explain, right? Maybe not now, because they've, gone more mainstream. But back in the day, the idea of the FBI, the men in suits, like this was a dead ringer for, like, if you're an LDS missionary, you are in the outfit that they wanted them in back then, right? Same haircuts, same everything. It's all conformity. And it's also an illusion for the masses, so that if they are from these family lines that are severely important, that they can rise up and go through these other things and have it be completely unknown. Why are there porch Mormons? I like to call them that instead of porch Masons. Right. The porch Mormons will tell you, I've gone to the temple every day of my life since I was blah, blah, blah. Nothing weird is ever happening there. And it's not. She's lying, and the LDS, Satan thing's lying, and all these things are lying, but yet they get leaked, right? And then we've got Levitt speaking out on some dumb conference saying he's not a cannibal. And by the way, no one asked you, bro. What are you doing?
That's a really weird thing to say.
Right. You're in the middle of a freaking press conference and you're an attorney. Why did you just let that bleep out of your dang mouth? Like, that's bananas. But we see, things fall apart like that. And why does that even happen if nothing nefarious is at work? Well, there's underlying factions for underlying factions, but underneath it all, you have to have a cover. You have to have a body of people that have never heard of any of this and will defend you to their death, because it's baloney. And I was one of those people, right? Like I was a normal Mormon, though my bloodline is very strange. I'm a woman. Yeah, that's great and all that my bloodline's weird, but I don't think they had any big use for me other than pumping out babies, which I definitely did. They're looking for the guys, and that's the truth. But, when we look at all this stuff and the organization and the hidden hand and, being hoodwinked, I mean, goodness, it's all right there. I hate to say it, but we know that Masonry, with JJ's work and the Society of the Cincinnati, I just feel like you look at the whole thing and you go, yep, like every single president, all these people. I mean, talk about disillusionment. That was even harder than my religion, was giving up certain things that I believed were patriotic, right? It's sad. It's hard. And I'm not saying I don't believe in certain things, but I just don't believe in the way they run it anymore. It's changed.
Yeah, there's definitely something there, because, if we examine a body of individuals in a religious situation as a cult. That's kind of a microcosmic reflection of something that's going on outside. And I honestly believe that. I honestly believe that we need people to be gullible. We need people to buy the line that the reason why you're not getting better is because these people over here are refusing the same treatment you're taking. And they buy that and get mad. And it's this massive trick of groupthink to get everybody to just toe the line and behave themselves. But at the same time, I really think that that machine can be dismantled. And I'm kind of curious as to your idea. What kind of ideas do you have regarding dismantling that kind of machine or building at least a resistance to it?
Right. I think you're right. I think we have to remember one thing. If we weren't powerful, they wouldn't give a crap. They would not give one crap about us. They would not give you rules. They would not retrain your brain. They would not put you in Rockefeller schools and, fix you all right up. If you weren't important, they'd just kill everybody. That's what they would do. Right. So we are the masses. I think that's really important to remember. We are the masses. They are not the masses. Why do you think they have to build fortresses? Like the first thing they all do is build themselves like some kind of thing to protect themselves, right? Because they know if the crap ever hits the fan, there's way more of us than them, But we all have to quit being such jackasses and stop hating each other. That would be good. Killing each other, hating each other, falling for their tricks. It's stupid. We have to step back and say, I can be proud to be whatever I am, and you can be proud to be whatever you are. And we don't have to hate each other. We can hate them together. Not hate. That's a bad word, right? We can come together as brothers and sisters is what we really are. Okay. And we can unite to protect ourselves. We don't even have to be aggressive. Like we don't have to go and attack. We just have to protect. And I think that is the big movement. And people are going to get mad at me on this one. I don't care about toxic masculinity. They want to remove your ability to be a natural born protector. And why would they do that? Why would they do that? Right. It's just to make sure that you are not a threat. They don't want you to be a threat. Why are they dumping hormones in your water? Why are they dumping hormones in your food? Why are they effeminizing everything? It isn't because everybody all of a sudden is gay. And I'm sorry, that's just not true. I don't think if you're gay, you're gay. But I don't think everyone is gay. Right. That's weird. It all of a sudden became the whole world. And I watched it with my kids, and it's really kind of scary. They've all gone through this weird phase in high school now where every friend they had, everybody, it's just weird. And I'm thinking, this is not the way it is. Do I think there's gay people? Yeah, I do. Do I think it's everybody? That's weird. What is happening? Why are women more aggressive and men not aggressive? Why are women, being led to, I see it a ton more in girls, liking other girls, right? Weird. Maybe if they're dumping the hormones in your stuff, that's part of the problem here, right? They're reacting different on men than women. That only makes biological sense. And what can you do about it? Well, what we do at my house, and I'll tell you one example that 100% was true. My son going through puberty, I said, we have to get reverse osmosis water. We have to. And I don't mean a cute little filter no, I mean the big machines where you go purchase it and it's a big pain in the butt to go down there constantly. We go down there and do that. And my son wouldn't drink it forever. It tastes funny, blah, blah, blah. He was just being on one. I don't know, but he had, a bigger chest, not muscles, than I would have expected at his age that he was, right? So I was concerned. It wasn't like horrible. It wasn't gynecomastia. It was like somewhere weirdly in between. He wasn't that chubby. So it shouldn't have been what it was. And finally, I talked him into, actually, our fridge water broke is what happened. The stupid filter on your fridges don't work either. And it broke. He had no other choice other than to drink plain tap water or the water that we buy. And he started drinking it. Within 6 months, they were gone. His chest was completely flat. Yep. And that he was shocked. I had been telling him, and he said, Mom, there's something to that. Like he thinks I'm half crazy about all the stuff I think. Right. But I'm just telling you guys, like biologically, if you don't look at anything, you're going to be affected. Look at things like, I'm not making this up. Go find out your water supplier and go look at their percentages of what they can filter out and what they can't and blah, blah, blah. You'll see it in black and white for your own self. You can go look at what they're poisoning you with and you don't care. Don't do other things. Like don't cook styrofoam in your microwave to reheat things. Like it's a bad plan, right? If you can avoid the microwave, avoid it, but we don't. These little tiny things may seem like nothing, but ultimately we have to do the little things to get to the point where we're strong enough to do the big things, right? We can't be a force other than spiritually. Physically, stop being sick, stop, with the certain things. If you're lazy, and I hate to say that, but like sometimes that is what it is. Does that mean I never eat out? No, just kind of try and tone it back, and know who's giving you your food. Like all the vegetables now from Mickey, where's, the Golden Arches, that's all Bill Gates produce. You want to eat Bill Gates produce? Knock yourself out. Like, do you know what's in that meat? Because I don't. Whatever. Do I still have vices? Sure. We have to go to the supermarket because it is what it is. Can you grow a garden for certain things? Yes. Can you get things locally? Sure. Is it still going to be tainted because they're spraying us constantly like we're bugs? Yep. It is it's a balance, but also that's where God comes in. Bless your food. There's a reason why we bless the food. And it's not just like words, like you're blessing your food because God could help you there where we can't help ourselves, right? You can only help yourself so much. Even the grapes in Napa, okay, the most pure virgin, untainted grapes to make the most pure wine that they have in Napa Valley still test positive for a whole bunch of chemicals. Why? The soil's ruined. Yeah, it's been ruined. And they know it, and they laugh about it in other countries. Why does food taste different when you go to Europe? I can tell you that it does. It's not just the gluten is processed different. No, they're not. They're not doing the spraying every 5 minutes. They're not. It's different. And that's by design, just like it's by design in Africa that they have a horrible time with clean water when they know damn well how to fix it. So, yeah.
Wow. Yeah, it's been a fantastic conversation, but I want you to go ahead and drop your podcast and links and things like that for me and all of that.
You bet. I am so happy to have been here. This was fun and a little mind dig. I don't always get to talk about other things. A lot of times it's just Mormons. So this has been fun. I appreciate it so much. I am Heidi Love of the Unfiltered Rise. I'm everywhere podcasts are served. Catch me at unfilteredrisepodcast.com. And if you go to YouTube, I am there once a week, but way more over on Spotify. Just the things I talk about, I want to keep my channel. So the same thing with TikTok. It's once in a blue moon, I kept getting strikes. So it is what it is. What do you do?
Great. Cool. Fantastic. Thank you, Heidi. I appreciate your time.
Of course. Thank you. Bye.
You take the blue pill. The story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill. You stay in Wonderland. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Thank you for listening. This is a free podcast based upon the value for value model. If you find value in this, or any episode, you can return that value by liking the show, subscribing to this channel, leaving a review, or sharing with a friend on your social media accounts. You can also donate on my website. Thank you again. This is BT for Truth and Shadow Podcast. You are the light in the darkness.
And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. You take the red pill. Remember, all I'm offering is the truth, nothing more. You stay in Wonderland. Believe whatever you want to believe.
The choice is always yours. Whatever society may claim, it can't control you.
Do I have an original thought in my head?
The truth, nothing more.